Captains of Industry, brought to you by Airtel.
Welcome back. You're watching Captains of Industry. Now we've been speaking to the MD for Africa at KFC. Their profits have trebled, their turnover has trebled. They're growing their reach across South Africa, planning 1,100 stores across the African continent, seeking to penetrate over 20 African countries. We're going to find out how they've been doing it. We've been speaking to Keith Warren, the MD of KFC. He's our Captain of Industry tonight. Thanks so much, Keith, for staying with us. Now, explain to us what happened in 1997, the relationship with the Yum Restaurant Group, other brands to come into your stable, and what that means for Africa at large.
Well, prior to 1997, we had for some years been part of the PepsiCo group, along with Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, our other two restaurant partners. And Pepsi had embarked on a vertical integration strategy in basically ensuring that they have a customer for their beverages, and we were a natural synergistic fit. But what they found was that it actually prevented them from accessing other restaurant companies, because other restaurant companies were saying, well, why am I going to sell Pepsi and essentially help my competitor? So Pepsi in 1997 realized that the next move for them was to disinvest the restaurant business and create a separate company, which they did, and that was called Tricon, which later we renamed as Yum Restaurants. Now, it's an interesting story, because we were spun in 97 with a market cap of around $4 billion, and we had $4 billion worth of debt. I can say, as of today, we have a market cap of around $26 billion and very limited amounts of debt. Right. The restaurant business has been extremely successful for us as a focused restaurant business, and that's something where I think by unbundling ourselves from Pepsi, there's actually been an enormous amount of shareholder value that's been created.
What does it mean, though, for the consumer on the ground? You did say earlier on that the one thing about the African consumer is they love their chicken. Absolutely. Do they love their pizza as much?
Well, we actually have been quite intrigued to see how pizza has resonated within the South African marketplace. I mean, we operated a smaller business here during the 90s, and I'll be blunt, we were a little bit distracted in our attention around KFC and lost focus on the pizza business and neglected it. And it was unfortunate, because I believe it's a very strong brand and has huge potential in the South African and in the African environment. As a result, we exited, and through that process, we've also then seen the advent of a number of other local brands, and when I'm talking about Debonair's or Roman's Pizza, etc. Yeah. And those guys have demonstrated that there is plenty of potential in the category. So we're having a good look at whether we want to come back and set up operations in South Africa again. There are a number of ways that we are doing it, whether it's through a casual dining type of experience or whether it's through your delivery takeaway experience, similar to what you're seeing nowadays with the local businesses. And the advantage of Pizza Hut is that we have an enormous business, 12,000 restaurants, 14,000 restaurants globally that are constantly developing technology, developing know-how, developing new products, developing new technology, better ways to use cheese and better types of cheese, etc., that we can actually bring to bear and to this market and to this environment.
Penetration into the rest of Africa, you're gunning for 20 countries, and it's the usual suspects, Nigeria, the Kenyas, but you're also going into the so-called frontier markets, the Zambias, Angola. What are your experiences there? Oh,
it's fantastic. The opportunities in Africa are enormous. I mean, so far we've opened in Nigeria. We should finish the year on 15 odd restaurants. We've got activities. We opened a store in Ghana on the main drag in sort of the hub of the city, and it has achieved volumes that we don't get in the most developed parts of the world. Yeah. We have great businesses in Zambia and in Kenya. We're going to be opening in Angola very shortly, in Malawi, Tanzania, Uganda, the DRC, Zimbabwe. In fact, actually, the meeting that I had with our Mauritian franchisees this morning was about discussing opportunities in Madagascar and Reunion. The potential for KFC in Africa is enormous. I mean, I've had the privilege
But what about the fact that we're just so different across the African continent? Yes, we've got huge potential when it comes to the critical mass of people, but we're different people. I mean, would KFC mean the same thing to French-speaking Africans in DRC and Portuguese-speaking Africans in Angola as it does in Ghana, as it does in South Africa?
There's certain fundamentals around quality food and great taste that I think cut across all countries and all cultures. And I mean, that's how we can operate in Indonesia, China, India, the United States, you know, the UK, France. I mean, so there's certain things that are consistent across all demographics. But however, we do, in terms of offering, allow for an enormous amount of customization. So the offering that we sort of provide, say, in China is very different to what we do in Australia, which is different to what we do in Nigeria. I mean, even within South Africa and Nigeria, there are differences in how in the range of flavors and profiles that we offer. I mean, we have a hot and spicy chicken in Nigeria that is fantastic, and we don't currently sell it in South Africa. And this is part of the beauty of having a brand that covers the continent, is that we can actually develop stuff here that is successful and then use it in Nigeria and vice versa. And we're going to be cross-pollinating food and products and flavors across the African continent. And my vision is that we're actually going to start exporting flavors and profiles across the world and developing best practice for the rest of the world.
There's got to be consistency in there, and that consistency is in the secret 11 herbs and spices.
That's the 11 herbs and spices. That's the secret recipe within the
Can you just
kernel.
tell me five spices?
Salt, pepper. But yes, no. I mean, we have the secret recipe in the original recipe, which we sell across all markets around the world. But there are many other ways to enjoy KFC.
Yeah. Let's talk about that secret herbs and spice thing. Apparently only 2 executives the world over have access to that recipe, and it's locked in a vault, and it's all very secretive, and even as you're making chicken you don't really know what's going in there. Is that a myth or is that reality?
That is 100% truth. It's an amazing story, but that is the reality. They go along and at a central kitchen go and create, so I call it the pixie dust, the magic, the special little additives that then gets sort of spread across the world. And we have some supply partners that then take that magic stuff, add it with other great tasting spices and herb mixes that then go along and make the original recipe spice, which then we sell.
But how does that happen? How does it
it
happen that only 2 people within the global KFC food fraternity have access to this recipe?
Because we take a great deal of care to make sure that the secret, that is the KFC original recipe, is maintained as such.
Then how do you know that KFC Santon is producing the right kind of chicken?
Because I know that the herbs and spices, herb and spice pack they get comes from a supplier. There are only 3 suppliers in the world that are authorized to produce our spice mix. And that then is done under license, and it's done under controls from our central organization to make sure that they use the secret pixie dust.
The myth of Colonel Saunders, or the story of Colonel Saunders, myth or reality?
Reality. He was a cook. He was a great cook, and I can let you in a little secret that he developed more recipes than just the original herbs and spices, and you'll hear more about that in not too far away. We actually discovered a recipe book of his in our head office in Louisville that has some really special secrets to share, which will happen in time.
I mean, in terms of branding KFC, a lot of the messaging has centered around the legend of Colonel Saunders. He's iconic for the brand. Yes. Are there any fundamental lessons that you draw from as executives at KFC from this man? Yeah,
it's lessons like what the Colonel stood for is integrity, focus around people, the values of great quality food. You can't skimp on quality. You can't take shortcuts. I mean, he was the numerous amusing stories about how the Colonel used to go and travel around the world and go and insist on checking the gravy, because the gravy is the way to tell that the product is being made absolutely perfectly. Yeah. And he had this determined sort of process that had to go through, and if the gravy wasn't good enough, he'd get really upset. And but this is all truth. This is the man. He was an inspirational chef, inspirational cook, and inspirational person that developed the business that is KFC today.
Who else inspires you? Because you've got to draw your business fundamentals elsewhere.
I'm most inspired actually by our chairman, David Novak. He is an amazing man. He was president of KFC USA at the age of, I believe, 38. He's been running our company for 13, 14 years now. Our stock price has gone up by a factor of 6 times under his leadership. Yeah. We have expanded dramatically, but the values that he extols is what drives our culture And that culture is what
Right.
what defines our company.
But there's Keith Warren, who's instilling a new African value system, something uniquely African to this brand. And you've got to draw that from somewhere. I mean, you've lived in Australia for 8 years. You are, though, a South African. Somebody's taught you to be authentic. Who is that person?
That's a hard one. I think I draw most of my makeup, my fiber actually comes from my father. He was a very successful businessman in South Africa in his day. In fact, he actually inspired me to become part of the fast food industry because in the 80s he was chairman of the Wimpy Group. And so as a youngster, I was being dragged around, QSR restaurants, whether it was Wimpy's or other concepts that he was looking at. And in fact, he tried to buy KFC for the company he worked for a number of times, and unsuccessfully, because he recognized what a great concept KFC actually is. And the values he extolled to me about integrity, authenticity, treating people fairly, and building relationships in order to get things done were things that I have enjoyed and sort of lived and practiced all my life. It's not just about how smart you are or how glib you are, it's about who you are that drives success in this, and certainly in our game, because we're a people business and people spot frauds very quickly.
Absolutely. So apparently you travel over 150 days a year. Some have even said 200 days. So you do need a lot of me time. What does me time mean?
Me time is time to reflect. I think one of the jobs of a CEO is actually to think. It's just to cogitate. You've got enormous numbers and amounts of stimulus that are coming into you at all times, and you have to be able to distill out of that what is important and what is applicable to your business, what is relevant, whether it's what's happening in the economy or whether it's what's happening in a restaurant out in some rural part of the country. So time to reflect and time to think is actually very, very important. I say quite literally, I never stop working because I'm always just thinking about what's going on and how things are happening.
What tools do you use to help you reflect? I know you love mountain biking.
I love spending time on the bike. I believe you've got to be healthy. You've got to be fit in order to function. Energy levels are enormously important in any business, but in particularly our business because it's so people-oriented. So you've got to look at ways how you can keep building your energy. That means getting out, get the endorphins flowing, go out there and be inspired. I love to go and spend time in the bush. I mean, I think for me, there's nothing better than going out into the Okavango Delta or into the Namib where there are no phones and there's no TV, and you sit out there and you can reflect and think.
In 3 words, because you're still fairly young and there's a lot of a career ahead of you. It might be with KFC, it might be elsewhere. But if you were to leave this company, the 3 words that people should describe you in terms of your leadership style, in terms of your values, the legacy you'd leave behind? Keith Warren is?
Tough but fair, authentic, and caring.
On that note, thank you so much for being our captain of industry. The views there of Keith Warren, feisty, fiery, energetic and very passionate about the KFC brand, bringing it to the rest of the African continent, bringing you the simple pleasures that you find in fried chicken, a place where memories have been made. You've been watching this edition of Captains of Industry. Thank you for your time.